Good morning, my name is Fee and I hope that you're okay this morning. The situation that we find ourselves in is one that we would never have imagined a few months ago, and it is affecting all of us in lots of different ways. For some of us, we might have been sick by the virus, we might have loved ones that are poorly, some of us might even have relatives that are in hospital. Some of us have sadly lost our jobs or are worried about losing our jobs and therefore have financial worries. Some of us are working on the front line for the NHS or as a key worker, or have relatives that are. We're separated from our families, from our friends, and the way that we live has just completely changed. And I think if we're all honest, no matter how strong our faith is, there are times when we have a wobble, and there are moments when we just kind of wonder what on earth is happening and where is God in all of this. And I think it's really important during these times of difficulty that we tell stories and retell stories of things that have happened in the past, of times when God has been faithful and times when God has been good. Because I think it's when we hear these stories that it reminds us that God is with us and that there is never a situation where God isn't, and God is always with us through everything that we go through. So this morning I would like to tell you a story, and my story is from Bokajee. Surprise, surprise, I hear you say. But I'm not sorry, because God is doing some amazing things in Bokajee. And I think it's really important that we hear those stories and we retell those stories, because it encourages us and reminds us that God is good and God is faithful even through the difficult times. And I would like to tell you a story about a boy, and I have a picture of him here, if I can just get it. And his name is Kasahun, and whether you can see that, but this is Kasahun. And Kasahun is one of the boys who has just gone to university. And so this time last year he was getting ready to sit his final exams at school and then head to university. Kasahun is really clever and has always dreamed of becoming a doctor. I think lots of children around the world dream of becoming doctors, but actually for Kasahun it was a dream that we knew would be realised, because he really is very clever. And so all of the students took their exams, and when the exams results came out at the end of the summer, Kasahun had done really, really well and was very, very excited about his future. In Ethiopia, when you go to university, the government decide where they send you based on the results that you have managed to get. But you do have an element of choice, and before you sit your exams, they ask you to submit your university choices, and these are listed from 1 to about 25. There's so many choices that each student is required to put down on their list. And from this 25, depending on your score, the government will allocate you and send you to a university. So based on the score that Kasahun had got, he was really optimistic that he would do really well and that he would end up going to one of his top choices to study medicine. I was actually in Bokajee in October with a friend when the allocation of places were given out, and Kasahun was given his choice of university and he was absolutely devastated. He was given his number 2 choice, but actually it was a choice that he had recorded way down his list, maybe I think he said maybe around 22, and we're not really sure what happened, whether it was through Kasahun's own mistake or whether someone had tampered with his list, but somehow his choice 22 had become his number 2 choice. And he was just devastated, and he came to see me and he said, "Fee, I don't know what I'm going to do. There is no way that I'm going to be able to be a doctor, because they don't even study medicine at that university." He went to see the people in the government offices in Bokajee to plead his case and to say, "Look, there's been a mistake, I don't know what's happened, but they weren't interested, and they suggested that perhaps he go to Addis and try his luck there in one of the big offices. So off he went on the bus to Addis Ababa, to the government offices there, and explained that what had happened, that he'd been given this choice that was actually recorded as his second, but it wasn't his second, it was his 22nd choice. And could they do something to change that based on the fact that he was a very strong student and had a good score. Again, they weren't really interested, and they said to him, I'm sorry, this is the way it is, and this is where you're going to have to go to university. The night before some of them left for university, I and my friend invited a group of the boys that had been our translators over the past few years to come for a chicken dinner. And this is something that I often do when I go to Bokji. I cook a roast chicken dinner for some of the high school boys. And we had our meal, and then we sat and we sang and we prayed, and we had a time of giving advice for the students as they left for university. And we prayed for each of the students in turn, and we really sensed God's presence in an amazing way that night. And as we prayed for Kasa, we prayed into his situation that God would bless him, that God would be with him, and that even though the situation had turned out differently to how he imagined, that God would somehow work in the situation and still bring his plan for Kasa's life into fruition. Off the boys went to university, I came back to the UK, and several weeks later I got an email from Kasa, who was just so excited and said, Fee, you'll never believe what's happened. The principal addressed all the students as we arrived and said for the very first time in the history of the university they were going to be offering medicine as a discipline. He was so excited. The students were told that during their first general year of study, where the students kind of study a mix of subjects, they would be examined at the end of the year, and those students that were the strongest would then be eligible to sit an exam to get into the medical school department of the university. And Kasa said he was going to work really hard and try to get a place in this medical school. Not long before lockdown, Kasa wrote to me and sent me his results for the year, and they were incredible. He had got A's across the board. In some subjects he'd almost got 100%, and he was given the opportunity along with others to sit for the entrance exam for medical school. There were 250 students that sat that exam. There were 40 places on offer, and I think you know what I'm going to say next. When all of the students were ranked in order of their score, Kasa came 9th, and he has been given a place to study medicine in his university from September or whenever university restarts for the students. And I just absolutely love that story. In fact, every time I retell it or I think about it, it gives me goosebumps, because I just think it is an insane story. We had a situation that seemed so hopeless and everything just seems stacked against Kasa, and yet here he finds himself now doing what he wanted to do all along. And I've heard very recently actually that even some of the students that ended up going to some of the best universities in the country for different reasons have not been able to get a place on the medical course, even though they had a score that was high enough. So I just think it is incredible, and I just want to encourage you this morning that if your situation does seem dark and hopeless, and I think for so many of us at the moment it does, or even not all the time, some of us have days when it feels that way, I would like you to remember this story and to think about God. We have a God who is good, we have a God who is mighty, and we have a God that brings hope in even the most hopeless of situations. Thank you.